At exactly 32 seconds in, the House Oversight chamber detonated with a silence so sharp it seemed to slice the air into ribbons. Cameras caught the moment Donald Trump, flanked by a ghost-white legal team and a nervous PR handler twitching in his seat, leaned into his mic and smirked. "Frankly," he said, his voice like gravel in a blender, "I question Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's IQ. It wasn't just a jab. It was an opening salvo in what would become a nationally televised humiliation, a political knife fight he would regret starting." $200 million in federal relief funds had vanished, swallowed whole by shell companies tied to Trump-aligned developers. 37 public housing projects across Texas and Louisiana lay gutted, some literally burned to their foundations. 5 veterans froze to death in Houston in January after shelters funded by that relief were never built. 3 of them were under 40. And yet, Trump had come here today not to explain, not to answer, but to mock, to belittle, to provoke. What kind of man taunts the woman holding the receipt to his crimes? The walls of the hearing room seemed to lean forward, curious. The air bled tension. Marble columns pulsed under fluorescent light like arteries holding secrets. Reporters barely breathed. Staffers clutched their phones like shields. One camera operator whispered, "God help him," and steadied the lens. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, not frozen calibrated. Her eyes locked on Trump like a surgeon assessing where to cut. She tapped the microphone once. Clear. Then again. Louder. The room obeyed. No gavel. No order, just gravity. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice smooth and flint-edged, "you question my IQ. But I question your memory of the Constitution, of basic ethics, and of $200 million that were earmarked for desperate Americans, but somehow ended up building luxury condos in Boca Raton." Gasps sparked like flint through the chamber. One aide dropped a pen. Trump's smirk began to curdle. Outside, crowds had already begun forming. Teachers, veterans, mothers holding signs with photos of their lost sons. Jason, age 28. Homeless after hurricane relief never came. Inside, a monitor showed Twitter melting. Crockett just vaporized Trump in 2 sentences. One trending post read, "Another, you don't come for a scalpel with a sledgehammer." The hearing room breathed, like a living animal, air thick with consequences. Jasmine raised a single folder. It wasn't large, but it was heavy. Paper aged by secrets. Manila turned dark at the edges, inked with agency stamps that whispered betrayal. "I hold here," she said, "exhibits pulled from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Wire transfers dated March 15, 2024. $75 million diverted from disaster recovery into Cyprus United Infrastructure Development, LLC, a firm owned coincidentally by your longtime associate Vince Delacroix. You remember Vince?" Trump blinked. His lawyer whispered something and was ignored. Jasmine didn't wait. "Mr. Delacroix," she continued, "is currently under investigation for fraud, tax evasion, and campaign finance violations. That $75 million? Gone. No schools built. No homes rebuilt. But hey, your golf course in Palm Beach got a new clubhouse." A veteran seated behind Jasmine stood suddenly. He was missing both legs. His voice, when it came, cracked like sun-baked pavement. "My daughter died in a FEMA trailer," he said. "Collapsed ceiling. She was 6. The room went silent again, not empty, but too full to breathe. Jasmine turned, gently touched the man's hand, then faced Trump. "Mr. Trump, you don't get to question the intelligence of the people cleaning up your messes, especially when your incompetence kills children." Trump's knuckles turned bone white against the table. "You're lying," he spat. She smiled without joy. "Truth doesn't need your permission to exist." The lighting in the room seemed to shift, then colder, clearer, like surgical LEDs overhead. Papers rustled like blades being drawn. The air became surgical, dissecting the false from the proven. Cameras zoomed in. Screens outside replayed every frame. Jasmine lowered the folder. "And we're just getting started." Somewhere in the hallway, a reporter whispered into their phone, "This is not a hearing. This is an execution. Inside, Trump shifted in his seat, but there was nowhere to hide. His armor was arrogance, and Jasmine had already pierced it. She reached beneath the desk and pulled out a second folder. This one was red, the color of warnings, the color of blood. Exhibit B, she said, laying it down slowly, deliberately. 200 pages of contracts, forged signatures, and misappropriated funds traced directly to campaign accounts linked to your Save America PAC. $25 million that should have built evacuation centers for the Gulf Coast. A gasp from the crowd. A woman clutched her chest. Another began to cry. Jasmine didn't stop. "Mr. Trump," she said, eyes sharp as shattered glass, "you didn't just steal money. You stole time. You stole futures. You stole air from the lungs of children who died waiting on your promises." Trump tried to speak, but the words failed. Just a wet click of teeth. His face began to flush. The walls whispered. The microphones hummed. Every second stretched into testimony. And then Jasmine leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You said you questioned my IQ, but I've got one question for you, Mr. Trump. When the water rose, and the shelters collapsed, and the veterans died cold and alone, did you even remember their names?" The silence wasn't empty, it was indictment. Outside, church bells began to ring, not for a service, but for a reckoning. The room was still reeling when Jasmine Crockett slid the red folder to the center of the table, its edges slicing through the air like a warning flare. No one breathed. Not Trump, who now blinked as if trying to erase the moment, nor the ranking committee members, frozen like wax statues under courtroom lights that exposed every flaw, every drop of sweat, every twitch of guilt. Before the echoes faded, Jasmine pressed a button. A screen descended from the ceiling with a mechanical groan that sounded like justice waking from a long sleep. The first slide lit the room with numbers. $25 million missing. 11,000 families affected. Below it, faces. Children wrapped in mold-stained blankets. A mother holding the remains of her son's asthma inhaler. A vet lying in a hospital hallway, covered only by a trash bag. "Exhibit C," Jasmine announced. She stood, never rushed, never loud, unfolding the next document with care, as if peeling back the skin of a lie. The pages were stiff, printed on government stock, stamped with the HUD seal, the kind of paper that doesn't flutter but lands. "These contracts," she said, holding them like holy scripture, "authorize the distribution of emergency funds to private contractors for post-hurricane reconstruction in the 5th District. But this line," she paused and pointed with surgical precision, "allocates $6 million to United Civic Freedom Foundation, a shell registered to a P.O. box in Mar-a-Lago." Trump scoffed. "That's not a crime." "No," Jasmine said, voice now lower, darker, "but paying your own legal bills with disaster relief funds is—" The room erupted. Not in noise, reactions don't need sound when the silence is carnivorous. Aides' heads dropped. Phones vibrated. One congressional staffer backed out the door to vomit in the hallway. Social media detonated in real time. Red folder was now a movement. Screens across the country refreshed with updates every second. High school students live-streamed civics class to watch. A Detroit pastor tweeted, "I just canceled Bible study. Crockett is preaching truth." The veteran from earlier stood again, tears streaming now. "You used us," he whispered to no one in particular. "You sold our bodies for condos." Jasmine placed the final document from the red folder flat on the table. A reimbursement invoice, handwritten, signed D.J. Trump. It read, "Reimbursement for legal consulting, $700,000, paid from funds meant for displaced Gulf Coast families." Her finger tapped the signature once, then again. "This," she said, "is the receipt for your soul." Trump laughed. It wasn't strong. It sounded like panic dragged through a garbage disposal. "This is political. This is all fake." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Tell that to Clara Hughes, age 9, died of sepsis in a trailer with no running water." On the screen, Clara's picture filled the frame, a missing front tooth, cheeks still round with childhood. Then her mother appeared, live via satellite, cradling Clara's last drawing. A house, water gushing from a pipe, a dog named Sparky. "She waited for that home you promised," the mother said through tears. "We kept believing the checks were just delayed." Trump turned to his lawyer, who now looked ready to vanish into the floor. He whispered something again. Jasmine cut through it. 14 children dead. 11,000 families displaced. $200 million gone. All while you claim to be a patriot. I have receipts. Do you have a soul? Gasps rolled through the gallery like thunder. Outside, the crowd doubled in size. Police erected barriers. Protesters held up candles and posters. A small girl, no older than Clara, held one that read, "My mom sleeps in a car because Trump took our roof." Jasmine kept going. "Exhibit D," she said, producing a sealed envelope the color of wet rust. The paper was thick, almost textured, like old linen. She sliced it open with her fingernail and drew out a single photo. A smiling real estate developer holding a champagne bottle beside Trump. Behind them, blueprints for a casino that was never built. On the blueprint, scrawled in Sharpie, "Fast track. Pull from recovery funds." "That casino," Jasmine said, "was never built because it was never real, but the money was. $12 million. Gone." Meanwhile, in Port Arthur, Texas, a voice cracked through the screen. "We were drinking rainwater out of buckets," said Jamal Banks, 32, a father of 3, appearing live from a FEMA camp. "My daughter has rashes all over her body. My youngest son hasn't eaten in 2 days. You told us to trust the process. The process killed my brother." Trump's jaw clenched. Sweat beaded at his temple. Jasmine leaned in, quiet, sharp. "You thought this would be a roast. It's an autopsy." The silence had changed. It was no longer afraid of Trump. It was watching him rot. Then the screen shifted again, this time to a bank statement. A single-line item. March 15, 2024. Wire transfer. $7 million to Freedom Safety Holdings. Recipient: Eric Trump. "Your son's company bought a yacht 2 weeks later," Jasmine said. Meanwhile, 14,000 residents of Cameron Parish were left without drinking water. Trump finally snapped. "You're obsessed with me." Jasmine paused. Then, "No, Mr. Trump. I'm obsessed with justice. And you, tragically, are still in the way." He opened his mouth. No words, just a groan, something collapsing inside him. Behind him, one of his aides rose and walked out, head down. Across the country, people wept in living rooms. A teacher in Chicago paused her lesson and turned the screen to the testimony. A group of veterans gathered at a VFW post in Mobile, Alabama, and saluted the screen when Jasmine spoke. "And still," she continued, "controlled, calm, precise." "We're not finished," Jasmine said, reaching under the table. A new folder. This one was black. The black folder didn't open, it unfolded, like a wound peeling back. Its cover hissed against the table, edges curled and worn like something ancient, something buried too long. Jasmine Crockett laid it flat with both hands, as if settling a body for autopsy. The chamber fell into silence so total, even the HVAC seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't drama, this was dissection. "Exhibit E," she said, the black folder pulsing like a heartbeat. "Internal memos from the Office of Management and Budget, dated April 2, 2024. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't need to. Her voice steady, scalpel sharp, did the cutting. "These memos detail a secret reallocation of $38 million from emergency medical infrastructure to private legal settlements, all to protect your failing golf resort in North Carolina from creditors." Trump's mouth twitched. His lawyer opened a file, then shut it just as quickly. There was nothing left to cite, nothing to hide behind. The screen shifted again. Jasmine didn't turn to look. She knew what it would show. Blueprints stamped, "Rejected, non-essential." They were hospital expansion plans from coastal Alabama. Rejected so those funds could patch the roof of a Trump property. "The memo includes a note," Jasmine said, lifting a single sheet between her fingers like it might bite. "Handwritten. authenticated by the General Accountability Office. She let the silence build, drawing the blade. She read it aloud. Pull the money from the mobile clinics. I won't lose another property to a Category 2 storm. F. These people? They never vote for us anyway. Signed, DJT. The room exploded. Gasps, sobs, curses. A woman collapsed in the gallery and had to be helped out. A father clutched a photo of his son Joshua, age 17, dead from a ruptured appendix after the closest rural clinic shuttered. "You stole his hospital," he shouted, tears streaming. "You stole my son's goddamn hospital." Jasmine placed the note back in the folder like a mortician tucking away evidence. "Exhibit F," she said, drawing the next sheet a list of settlement payouts, all traced to civil complaints from vendors stiffed by Trump-owned companies after hurricane contracts were granted and then vanished. 29 shell companies, 9 different states, a paper trail that screams theft in 6 languages. Then she paused. "Mr. Trump, how much is a human life worth to you? Because I've done the math. Your theft of $38 million divided across lost clinics, halted emergency services, and community evacuations comes out to 48 Americans. 48. She dropped the paper. It struck the table like a gunshot. "Names?" she continued, pulling another sheet. "I have them. You may not remember them, but they sure as hell remember you." She listed them. Patrice Daniels, 43, asthma, died on the floor of her home in Lake Charles. Ruben Santiago, 81, heart attack while evacuating. No ambulance available. Kylie Mendez, 5, electrocuted in floodwaters while looking for her dog. Jasmine's voice was still even, surgical, but her words drew blood. "You stole ventilators. You stole insulin fridges. You stole cell service towers that would have given those families one last call." Trump shook his head, muttering, "It wasn't me. It wasn't." Jasmine's eyes sharpened. "You signed every reallocation. Your initials are on every directive. Your lawyer is on every wire. You are not the storm, Mr. Trump. You are the floodgate that failed on purpose." The gallery behind her stood. Not one person remained seated. Then came the next visual. A check, zoomed in, high resolution, dated May 3, 2024. Pay to the order of Storm Recovery Trust, Eric Trump. Amount, $650,000. Memo, consulting. "No services were ever rendered," Jasmine said, "but that money was deducted directly from a disaster fund meant to rebuild public schools in Terrebonne Parish. The middle school still has no roof." She looked up, directly at Trump for the first time in 10 minutes. "Your son bought a sports car with that money." Trump gripped the edge of the desk, as if the truth physically tilted the room. "You're trying to destroy my family," he said, low and hoarse. Jasmine didn't blink. "No, Mr. Trump. You did that already. I'm just reading the receipts." Another pause. Then she pulled one final page from the black folder. White paper, red ink. A single sentence. "Find a way to lose the files. The voters won't notice until it's too late." Date, June 12, 2024. Author, Jared Kushner. That lost file was a FEMA Alert System expansion order. If it had gone through, we estimate over 9,000 more Americans could have received early flood warnings. But the order disappeared. And with it, 9,000 voices. A projection lit the back wall. Photos, all dead, all drowned. Names like rain. The silence that followed was not silence. It was mourning. And Jasmine Crockett stood at its center, unmoving. Then, her voice again. Calm, surgical. "You came in here today to question my intelligence. Let me offer you a lesson in forensic accounting, congressional oversight, and moral obligation." She walked to the table, slowly, pulled a new document from her stack, and laid it flat. It was not printed. It was handwritten, a statement from a Trump Organization whistleblower. It began, "I was told to shred the original HUD files. I kept copies. Jasmine Crockett is the only one I trust." Trump's head snapped up. Outside, The crowd roared so loudly it could be heard through the marble. Inside, the light seemed to burn colder, as if judgment had come not from above but from beneath. And Jasmine, never raising her voice, spoke one final time for the day. Justice doesn't scream, it documents. The chamber hadn't recovered when Jasmine Crockett pulled out the next file, thicker, heavier, bound in cracked leather like something unearthed from beneath a courthouse floor. The stitching on its spine was hand-sewn. Its weight hit the table with a dead sound, and the room, already breathless, tensed like an organism sensing something sacred and profane was about to be revealed. "Exhibit G," she said. Her voice wasn't just calm, it was sharpened glass wrapped in silk. Trump looked sick. He had shifted 3 inches back in his chair, hands clenched around the armrests, neck flushed, beet red. His lawyer had given up whispering. The aides behind him were now just praying they wouldn't be named next. Outside, the protests had tripled. Parents, veterans, survivors of Hurricane Cyril holding up receipts, photos, and birth certificates, like they were shields. Jasmine opened the file with deliberate ceremony, letting the leather crackle under fluorescent light. The first page, a Trump Organization email dump. Thousands of internal messages, subpoenaed by court order, time-stamped, geotagged, and irrefutable. She lifted the paper slowly. It glistened slightly, glossy from archive ink. Her fingers traced a highlighted line as she read aloud. "If HUD pushes back, we'll just funnel through the church front. The bishop's already on board." Subject line: Louisiana Workaround. Dated February 16, 2024. Sender: Donald Trump Jr. Trump's head dropped. The room groaned, a pressure system of disbelief shifting its weight. Jasmine turned the page. "We call it God laundering," she said, quoting. "Direct funds from federal disaster accounts into pseudo-religious NGOs, then wash it through property deals." She paused, then delivered the line without flinching. "You turned faith into a front. You used God as a getaway driver." The chamber erupted, audibly. Even committee members known for partisanship now leaned forward, disgust etched into their faces like weathered stone. A congressman from Arizona took off his glasses and muttered, "Jesus." "No," Jasmine said calmly. "That's who they used, not who they served." She turned the file again, revealing a spreadsheet with 39 transactions, all tracked from government contracts into religious entities, registered within a 3-month window. None of them had operating congregations. One, New Light Cathedral, LLC, shared a business address with Trump Doral. $10 million passed through that one alone, Jasmine said. $10 million meant for dialysis centers, wound care clinics, and rural health stations. A woman stood in the back row. Her name was Angela Rivas. She clutched a photo of her son David, age 29. Diabetic. Died in an abandoned strip mall parking lot waiting for insulin. "They said the clinic would open by fall," Angela whispered, voice cracking. "Fall came. David didn't make it." Jasmine turned toward her, not for applause, not for dramatics, but because testimony deserved respect. "Your son's name is now part of the record." Then she walked back to the center. "Exhibit H," she said, unfolding a final sheet. This one handwritten in a shaky scrawl, the ink bleeding from the bottom as though it had been clutched too tightly. It was a resignation letter from a FEMA accountant, a veteran. He'd left after being forced to reroute storm relief to executive priority zones, a code phrase, later revealed, for Trump-owned properties and neighborhoods with high-dollar donors. The accountant died by suicide 3 weeks later. Jasmine's voice did not crack, but others did. His name was Michael Hurley, 37 years old, Iraq War veteran, served with distinction, worked for FEMA to save lives. Instead, he watched you prioritize golf course irrigation over dialysis machines. She paused. His last words to his wife were, "I'm helping the wrong people." Trump covered his mouth. The silence was now radioactive. Jasmine then reached for a prop no one expected. A map. Unfurled across the table, it showed red dots across the south. Each dot, a location where federal money vanished. Each dot a name, a face, a child. The screen behind her synced with the data, and each dot pulsed with the corresponding victim's photo. One dot blinked, then another, then another. Within seconds, 48 faces filled the screen. "This is the cost of corruption," Jasmine said. "This is the body count." Then she turned, sharp as a blade. "You tried to paint me as dumb," she said, finally addressing Trump directly. "But intelligence isn't loud. It's prepared. It doesn't wave. It waits, and then it ends you." The crowd outside erupted in a coordinated chant, "Crockett, Crockett, Crockett!" It surged through the walls like thunder coming from the people themselves. Trump, pale and trembling, tried to speak. "You're twisting this. You think you're better?" "No," Jasmine said. "I'm not better. I'm just not a thief." Trump slammed the table. "It's all fake! This is a witch hunt!" Jasmine stepped forward. 1 foot. A single breath between them now. "Funny," she said softly. "Witches use smoke. I use receipts." The room froze. That was it. That was the moment. The line. Every journalist in the room typed it in unison. On TikTok, it would hit 20 million views in under an hour. At an Atlanta bar, an entire crowd watching on TV would leap to their feet. A pause. Then Jasmine lifted the map, rolled it slowly, and placed it beside the black folder. She took one last document, clear, laminated, undeniable. A signed waiver from Trump's personal assistant, authorizing a wire transfer to New Light Cathedral. On it, a note from Trump himself. "Get this done before the midterms. People don't read." Jasmine turned to the cameras. "But we read, we remember, and now we respond." She sat down, not in triumph, in precision. The silence thundered. Across the nation, people who had lost homes, family, hope sat taller. And outside, the chants had become one unified voice. Truth doesn't scream, it documents. The chamber didn't breathe. The weight of truth had become too dense, too complete. Jasmine Crockett's final documents lay spread before her like a battlefield's aftermath pages, stained with signatures, redacted lines exposed, timelines stitched with the names of the forgotten. Trump had gone silent. Not because he'd accepted guilt, but because reality had strangled his ability to spin it. The lights above cast a merciless white across the chamber, surgical, clinical, like the room itself was preparing for a final incision. Jasmine stood. Not to gloat, to close. "Parties in power," she began, her voice steady as the tide, "often believe accountability is optional. That if you yell long enough, people stop asking questions. That if you mock loud enough, truth forgets how to speak. But it never forgets. It waits. And when it finally rises, it doesn't knock. It kicks the damn door in." Trump's hands trembled now. He clutched a sheaf of his own talking, point shaft crumpled, useless. Sweat rolled down his cheek. Not drama. Biology. Collapse. Jasmine held up a small envelope, white, creased, almost humble. "This was sent anonymously to my office last month," she said. Inside it, a letter from a federal employee, still active, still afraid. She opened it. "My job is to track funds from FEMA. We were told not to ask about 34 unaccounted wire transfers. When I questioned it, I was reassigned to data entry. I'm terrified. But I trust Congresswoman Crockett." She folded it carefully. "I won't name this person. Not yet. But I will tell you what they uncovered." She held up a fresh spreadsheet, transparent and glinting under the surgical lights. 34 wire transfers, totaling $19 million, routed through Cayman Islands subsidiaries, linked to 2 entities, American Infrastructure Ventures and Coastal Freedom Logistics. Both trace back to Trump enterprises. Both used hurricane emergency authorizations to bypass oversight. Screens behind her showed the transfers, then the photos of the empty lots where clinics were never built, roads never paved, schools still underwater. Jasmine's voice dropped, almost a whisper. 19 million stolen, 800 families still in shelters, 400 children without schools. 76 veterans still waiting on mental health care. Why? So you could patch a golf course? Trump's face crumpled. This is a hoax. She didn't blink. Then sue me. He stared, hollow. Everyone in the room knew. He wouldn't. He couldn't. Because everything had been documented. Jasmine turned again to the crowd across the room, into the cameras, and to the nation. I'm not here for applause. I'm here because truth has teeth. And it bit back today. The chamber didn't just erupt, it ruptured. People cried. A man in uniform saluted her. A teacher clutched the arm of a mother next to her and whispered, "Finally." A high school student posted, "She just made me want to run for office." Outside, the crowd had swollen. A sea of signs, faces, chants. One voice on a bullhorn read names. Joshua Dean, Clara Hughes, Michael Hurley, Kaylee Mendez. Inside, Jasmine picked up one final item. A framed photo. From the FEMA records room. The wall of those lost while waiting for federal aid. She held it high. This is who matters. Not the conmen, not the cowards, the people. Then, almost gently, she packed every folder black, red, leather, laminated into a single box. Labeled, "Submitted for DOJ referral." The entire hearing room stood, not for spectacle, for history. And Trump? He didn't speak again. His lawyer whispered, "We need to go." But Trump didn't move. His power wasn't taken, it had evaporated. No volume, no glare, no finger-pointing could unwrite the receipts. He stared at Jasmine Crockett like a man staring into a mirror that no longer lies. She offered no further words. She didn't need to. Her work was documented. In the following 72 hours, the Department of Justice opened a formal investigation. FEMA launched an internal audit, suspending 9 Trump-linked contractors. The House voted 378 to 57 to approve a full criminal referral. Civil lawsuits began rolling in from 4 states. Protests became vigils, then town halls, then organizing hubs. 17 city councils passed transparency resolutions. A bipartisan bill was introduced, the Crockett Accountability Act. Meanwhile, children whose schools had crumbled in the storms saw Jasmine's face on the news and asked their parents what she did. And those parents' mothers who had buried sons, veterans who had waited too long for shelter, teachers still using moldy classrooms replied, "She made the liars answer." And in living rooms across America, people cried not out of sadness, but release. Because finally, someone had looked the biggest bully in the face and said, "You don't get to win with noise." And finally, someone had proven it. Jasmine Crockett didn't roar. She documented. And that made all the difference.